current and future mamas, welcome. This is Mama Matters, where we talk all things from bump to birth and beyond. Nothing is too weird or gross or taboo here. And motherhood wasn't meant to be done alone, so let's go on this journey together. Remember that you matter and your story matters. A quick disclaimer before we get going with today's program. I have been an occupational therapist for the past 15 plus years. However, this program and this entire series does not constitute direct occupational therapy services, nor does it constitute medical advice of any kind. So if you're experiencing changes or concerns with your body or mind, please contact your healthcare provider who knows your story and your history best. And if you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Hi, current and future mamas. Welcome. This is Mama Matters, where we talk all things from birth to bump and beyond. Nothing is too weird, gross, or taboo here. And remember, you matter and your story matters. Motherhood really wasn't meant to be done alone, so let's go on this journey together. Hello and welcome to today's installment of Mama Matters. I'm so excited to have you here to listen to this awesome shared sort of account of motherhood and just the transition from pregnancy to postpartum that this wonderful mama went through. In this version today, she sent me responses online to a survey, and so I'm going to kind of just go through what she said and chat about it a little bit, kind of give my input or my thoughts about things and just share with you her experience. So without further ado, this is Allison's experience in motherhood. She is from St. Augustine, Florida, and it says here that she is a Catholic mom of 2 children. She works part-time as an occupational therapist. She is married to her high school sweetheart. Love that. And she is in her mid-40s and loves being a mom. So that is super exciting and awesome. Okay, question number 1. So this entire survey for her was focused on what real moms want and need for pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. So a lot of these questions are sort of centering around that topic. What were some products that you loved and found useful for yourself during pregnancy or postpartum? And Allison said, compression socks for working on my feet all day while pregnant. Postpartum, I was so thankful the nurse packed up extra maternity mesh underwear and pads for me to take home, and the squeeze bottle for cleansing my peri area down below for the first few days. So I just wanted to note that, yes, I think those things don't get talked about enough, actually. Compression socks are so super useful for just preventing or managing the swelling, because especially if you stand a lot during the day, all of your swelling is going to just sort of head down toward your lower extremities, your feet, your legs, and get really puffy. So, of course, also taking breaks during the day whenever you can to sort of put your feet up. I remember feeling super embarrassed at first. I'm not really sure why, to like be at events. Like when I was later in pregnancy, it was obvious that I was pregnant. So I'm not sure why I was like so nervous about this, but basically just like putting my feet up on chairs. Like if I was at a conference or something, grabbing another chair and putting my feet up. I did it anyway, but I remember feeling like, oh, this is so awkward. Like, why? People, I'm sure, were like, yes, put your feet up. But anyway, compression socks can really help with standing on your feet all day. And then I always recommend to people, when I'm working in the hospital, I always recommend like, hey, take some of the stuff that's already in your room and yeah, take it home with you. The squeeze bottle, I love recommending the squeeze bottle. So a lot of times they'll give you one in the hospital, but if not, you can rinse out really other types of squeeze bottles. Make sure they're just totally cleaned out, of course. But I've even recommended like the solution for contacts when you wear contact lenses. Rinse those out really, really good. Make sure there's nothing left in them and use just sort of lukewarm or warm water to squeeze sort of in your vaginal area, because it just helps so much to not be wiping with toilet paper, especially in the beginning, first few days and weeks. And also after C-section or any other traumatic birth, it really helps to get down there and kind of reach without having to twist and torque your body in funny ways, reach around your belly, that kind of thing. So I love that suggestion as well. Okay, the next question is, what were some healthcare services or offerings of help from family or friends that were useful or helpful to you during pregnancy and or postpartum? So Allison says, I could not have been successful with breastfeeding if it were not for my very patient, supportive, and knowledgeable lactation consultant. They were very knowledgeable. The very knowledgeable nurse at my pediatrician's office that was in training to be a lactation consultant. These two women helped me so much. Also, my mother was there whenever I needed her and would lend a helping hand and even follow my crazy detailed new mom details when she knew none of them were really necessary. She did it to ease my mind. I think that's super important because, first of all, every mom is on their own journey. This is why I have mom empowerment written behind me. You're on your own journey, and yes, there's always going to be people who are more experienced than you or who have done things before you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know the right thing for you or your family. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they know the most up-to-date information. Like, things change from when our parents were parents, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's tough, but advocating for what you need for your schedule or for the way that you want to feed your baby or whatever, I think is so important to the success of your health and well-being and also your family's function. So I know it's hard because people come at you with so many different opinions and, well, I did it this way and this is the way that I heard was best and things like that. But at the end of the day, you're the one living in your situation and going to sleep at night or not sleeping at night. And so you have to make decisions that work for you. I think, make educated decisions and learn as much as you can. But then at the end of the day, you have to decide what works and what doesn't work. So I love that her mom helped her along and supported her, even with her crazy details. I mean, I know we feel crazy because we're like, I need to do it this way. But sometimes those details are not so crazy. I know I had to do certain things myself because I had so much anxiety. I already was an anxious person to begin with, and then I definitely had postpartum anxiety. So doing things a certain way and with detail and with routine really helped calm some of that. Didn't take it away, but it helped me. So I totally agree with that. And then also, yes, I think it's not talked about as frequently. Nowadays a little bit more so, but that lactation consultants don't only come from the hospital. They have private services that will come to you. They also often, a lot of the really good pediatrician offices will employ nurses who are either lactation trained or actual lactation consultants. And there's different levels of what lactation consultants can do or what they're trained in. There's even speech therapists that focus on this. And they can look at more things specific to the baby, like their latch and things like that. So there's so many resources out there. Definitely when you're interviewing pediatricians, ask if they have any nurses on staff who are, trained in lactation, if they have specialized certifications or trainings, and if not, if they have any recommendations for who you can reach out to, because I think that's super helpful. There's also La Leche League that has lots of consultants on board, and they can answer a lot of questions. So just throwing that out there since that was brought up. Okay, Allison says, I also saw 2 different women's health physical therapists through physical therapy. And I want to say that nowadays there's also pelvic health occupational therapists as well. But through PT, I was able to get over constant pain from scar tissue, learn how to function with the changes to my anatomy and pelvic floor strength, and get back to living life. I was also able to accept my postpartum body changes with positivity instead of feeling like I was broken. These therapists helped to normalize physical trauma from birth and really made a huge difference in my recovery. Love that. So nowadays, it was more common years ago to only have physical therapy, but now there's actually physical therapists and occupational therapists can both have post-graduation trainings, post-certification training. So after you become an OT or PT, you can specialize in different healthcare sort of genres or topics or, areas of specialization. And so, for example, you might have heard of lymphedema therapists or hand therapists or brain injury therapists. There's also pelvic health therapists. And I didn't know that. I didn't know the different types of therapy. My kids are a little bit older now, but I wish I had known that. And funny enough, I didn't think I was going to be interested in going down that path for myself as an OT, but now I absolutely love it. I've done lots of trainings myself, so super, super cool. And I think she made a really good point here of saying that not only do these therapists see you and help you get through all these major bodily changes that your pelvic floor and your core go through from pregnancy to postpartum. But they also, the good ones at least, really help normalize what you're going through. Because I think I didn't realize how, until I became a mom myself, I didn't realize how taboo it was for people to talk about things like, okay, I'm experiencing prolapse of my uterus and it's affecting me in these ways. Or I'm leaking when I'm going to the gym and it's really embarrassing because I can't wear any colored pants besides black because it'll show, or, things like that. So I never realized how difficult it was to talk about all these things since it's so often not talked about. So another reason to throw out that having the resources of physical or occupational therapy for pelvic health is super important to make you not feel alone, to make it not feel so scary and that you're the only one going through all this stuff. And then Allison said, also, my labor nurse, who was brave enough to encourage me that I could give birth without an epidural and help me to logically make the best decision for my situation. She helped me to see that I couldn't stay still long enough to even attempt an epidural, and she encouraged me that I was close, and she believed I could have a natural birth. That is so awesome. I think just finding, any person who's in your corner, whether that's your partner, your caregiver, your person that's with you, or a medical professional. There are so many. We're going to touch on all these different providers throughout this series. There's doulas that you can hire. There's nurses that can be fantastic, and tell them, say, hey, you're doing such a great job advocating for me and with me. Please stick around and help me. I really appreciate that. They love that. And it motivates them to do even more for you and help you even more. And also just wanted to touch on there that I think that nurse advocating and helping Allison along with her birth plan and along her birth plan, but also the sort of the veers and the paths that it ended up taking is so important, because you might have something in mind. And then in her case, she just kind of couldn't go with an epidural because she couldn't keep still for it. And supporting you through the twists and turns, but also what you want and what you're looking for in your birth experience. It doesn't always go as planned, and that's my experience, but having someone in your corner is so, so helpful, because you can't think clearly in the moment, and sometimes there's just a lot going on. So having that support is great. Okay, the next question is, what were services or offerings to help that were not helpful or even harmful to your mental or physical recovery? Allison said, in hindsight, I realized that I had very little knowledge about what I could do or ask my spouse of the healthcare providers to do in order to limit tearing and soft tissue damage during a fast vaginal birth. Giving birth at a teaching hospital with a resident who was more interested in watching the football game than actually coaching me through the birth. Yikes. For a long time, I blamed her for the physical trauma and injury I had to my pelvic floor and vagina during birth. Oh my gosh, that has got to be, for me at least, that would have been a whole situation to process. And I think we're not given a lot of time to process our individual circumstances and kind of what we go through during the birth journey. And so I think I just want to encourage you to make time to process and to feel empowered. That's the theme I'm going to come back to during this whole interview with Allison, because I think a lot of us would love to be able to go back in time and say, hey, if I felt more empowered and knew a little more about what I could say or what I could ask for, things would have gone a little bit differently. So I know you can't change the past, but I hope that throughout the series you feel even more empowered to ask more questions and know more about your own health. So Allison said, I also remember the very unprofessional nurse at my OB office. I called the office a couple of days after I had been home from the hospital. I had noticed that the area I had stitches to repair a tear looked significantly different than it did the day I left the hospital. I was concerned the stitches were coming out and the tear was reopening. When I called, the nurse laughed at me, and said, well, honey, I'm not sure why you looked at your vagina with a mirror. You aren't ever going to look the same as you did. You made a big mistake, honey. Just forget you ever looked. Ooh. She went on to assure me that nothing was wrong. I was genuinely concerned about my healing, and to have someone chastise me that way made me angry and very sad, on top of postpartum hormones. I hung up in tears and called back and asked for the office manager. I explained what had happened and asked if I could come into the office today. She asked if Allison could come into the office today. She met me at the door and took me right into the room. The doctor reassured me that things did look different and that I was scarring. She then helped me to schedule physical therapy, again, can also do occupational therapy, for the near future to get started working on the scar tissue. So the office manager and doctor turned a terrible experience into a step in the right direction. Thank goodness, because it's nerve-wracking. First of all, it's nerve-wracking asking questions because you're not sure if something's normal or not normal, especially with your first birth. And to have someone chastise you, not only that, and patronize the heck out of you. Well, honey, like, oh, it takes so much courage for some, at least for me, to stand up to people like that. And especially when they're in charge of your health, like to be like, look, I just need to get checked out. There's no reason that people need to talk to you like that. So I am so glad that Allison went back, knew to talk to the office manager and explain her concern. Hopefully let the doctor know as well, this is what went down and this is not okay. Because in the end, she got the services that she needed. She got physical therapy, pelvic floor therapy involved to help her with that scarring. And the other thing about it too that really irks me is that a lot of times providers, like the general providers, will say things like, that's normal or that's common. And that might be true. Maybe a lot of moms experience scarring. Okay, well, that's true. Maybe you had a very traumatic birth. But that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do about it. And I think at the very least, having referrals to just go talk to other practitioners who are more specialized in dealing with that scarring is phenomenal, because then you get the care that you need and you can return to your function as much as possible. Because a lot of times things like that can be dealt with relatively, not simply, but there could be a pretty good solution for it that the general providers don't always know about. So referring you out to someone who does is fantastic. One more thing I was going to say is that the nurse recommended not looking at her vagina because it would never be the same. I recommend the complete opposite. I recommend looking at that vagina. And I know that might sound like really weird or taboo advice, but to me, it's if more people felt comfortable with their own bodies and looking at them and examining them, just like you would your elbow. If you bump your elbow and, it's really, really bad, it hurts really, really bad. This is a silly example. You're going to look at it and be like, did I get a bruise? Did I get a scratch? Do I need a Band-Aid? You're not going to be like, oh my gosh, that's really embarrassing. My elbow's never going to be the same. No, there's no other body part that we treat like that. And I understand it's a private area. Of course, I'm not saying show it to the world, but I'm just saying there is nothing wrong with inspecting your body. In fact, I recommend to inspect your body, observe, note, see what's going on with things. And if you have time, if you're reaching this this channel at a time where you haven't yet given birth or you're still in the planning stages, start checking yourself out now. I know that sounds weird. We don't talk about it a lot. Get down in front of a mirror and look and see what things look like so that when things change, you're aware of what those changes are and you can speak to them more clearly. So when the doctor says to you, well, what changed? You can say, well, it was this color and now it's this color, or it was this way and now it's swollen, or, when I touched this area, it was not painful and now it is. That kind of data really helps practitioners know who to refer you to and also what specific thing is going on that they can try to help with. So I very much give the opposite advice of that nurse. And I say, oh my gosh, get down there and look. It is your body. It's part of your body. You're allowed to look and you should look. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. But we talk about breast exams. I think vulva and vagina exams are just as important. So, okay. And then these are a little bit more general questions about Allison's pregnancy and postpartum. How was your pregnancy? And I just gave some prompts did you experience any complications or challenges, things you didn't expect? Did you feel good the whole time or was it up and down? Did you see any specialists? Allison said, I was very nauseated for the first 14 weeks. I lost 15 pounds, despite trying to eat as much as I could. Oh my gosh, frustrating. I didn't get back to my normal weight until I was 30 weeks. Dang, girl. That has got to feel awful. I loved the feeling of the baby moving inside me and really tried to enjoy the miracle that was happening inside me. I had to have a special ultrasound to rule out a very scary genetic mutation that would have caused severe life-threatening disability with my second child. It was scary, but thankfully all ended up fine. I didn't expect to have such bad varicose veins on my legs and on my labia. It was painful and a lot. I think that very much like shows just the sort of like range of how people feel. I think a lot of times in our society it's talked about, like the minute you're pregnant, you're going to feel this amazing maternal connection. And I don't know. I don't think that that's always the case. And I want to normalize that that's not always the case. That was not the case for me. It felt very foreign and alien to me what was going on in my body. And I also felt very nauseous as well, which is, I personally, not that anyone enjoys that, but I just did not. That was not my vibe. So I'm thinking about Allison like losing weight and then 30 weeks, like there's only 10 more weeks to go. Oh my gosh. Before she gained weight back. So there's just so many ups and downs, and that's never to scare anyone. It's just to normalize that there are ups and downs and that it's not all this like perfect scenario for a lot of women, if not most. Did you feel supported in pregnancy? Yes, I felt supported by my healthcare providers. My coworkers were amazing. My family was great, and my friends were great. Love that for her. I think it's a great thing to start looking for or sort of noting who are the folks that are very supportive in your life before baby comes or before you become pregnant even. I don't know, and just give them ways that they can let them know what they're doing well for you and how that will continue to support you and work for you in other stages, because I think that's so important and valuable for communication and to keep you feeling supported, because people want to help. And if you're not feeling the support, like I know there's lots of scenarios where work is not supportive, coworkers are not supportive, family is not supportive, there's not a village. Sometimes people move right before they have their baby. So just know that there's other support networks out there, whether it's Facebook groups. I know during mine, this is going to age me a little bit, but during my pregnancy and postpartum, there was a thing called Baby Center. I'm not sure if it's still around. It was kind of like an app or a website where you could post. You had like a username and you could post questions, and you had to accept that it wasn't necessarily medical advice, but it was kind of nice to hear moms talking about different topics, anywhere from trying to conceive and infertility to, is this normal for my baby to be spitting up this much, to should I be bleeding, that kind of stuff. So there's things out there, there's virtual groups, there's so much technology now, which is really cool. But I think figuring out in what ways you need the support is super, super helpful. How was your birth experience? And then I gave some prompts like, did things go to plan or close to it or far from it? Did you have a support person at the birth? What was their role? How did you feel about the person? Did you experience mental or physical trauma? Allison said, I was able to deliver naturally, which was my plan. My husband was there and was very supportive. The AC was broken in my room and it was very hot. Oh my gosh, remember she's in Florida. I was disappointed that the plan for us to save and donate our baby's cord blood was not able to be accommodated as we had discussed at our appointments. By the time I got to the hospital, about 45 minutes after my water broke, I was in transitional labor. Things happened very quickly, and although I wasn't sad about a quick labor, it's not what I expected. I think that's, just a great note on, especially as a first-time mom, if you go to the classes and things like that, they'll talk about stages of labor. They'll talk about all these things that are normal or common. And then a lot of the times they don't go that way. And you're like, well, what the heck? Like, that is not what I was expecting at all. And also, why am I the weirdo? Or why did things like happen so differently than what they explained in these classes? So, I don't want to just stress to expect the unexpected, but I think having like some backup plans, I wish I had some backup plans or even just some backup knowledge. Like I didn't know about C-section really at all. And that's what I ended up with. So, things like that. But wow, hers went really, really quickly. And, the AC being broken and stuff like that, man. Okay, how was your postpartum experience? And then some prompts like, did physical healing go as you expected? Did you experience physical or mental health symptoms? Did you find the information you needed, or were you looking for more support? Allison said, I spoke above about the physical healing. It took a long time. about 2 years to be able to sit on a bicycle seat. I still have nerve damage resulting in paralyzed pelvic floor muscles, which have caused a significant prolapse and limit the physical activities I can participate in. I no longer use tampons. I don't jump, run, jog, and must be mindful of how I lift things. All in all, I'm grateful that 15 years post-delivery, I'm able to maintain continence and have little to no vaginal pain. So again, I wanted to emphasize that none of this is ever to scare new moms, pregnant mamas, people, planning to become pregnant. I think it's just, it's meant to be real talk, right? Like, I think if we know about these things and know how to have conversations about these things, it just makes it feel so much, it's more healthy, it's more relatable, it's more accessible to talk about these things. So just because one person experienced it this way does not mean you have to, of course, either. But I think that's another plug for pelvic floor therapists, because they can determine, like, hey, is it a paralyzed pelvic floor muscle? Is it tightness? Is it scarring? Like, what are causing these issues, and help you not only resolve some of the issues or all of the issues, but return to activities that are important to you. And that's where OTs come in too, very much so. Is like, okay, well, how is this affecting you, and how can we get you back to a safe, not only safe, but like functional participation in what makes your life meaningful. We can also help you with like recommendations for things like, okay, hey, we've done all these things, but the prolapse is severe. Here are some other, resources, or maybe like other referrals to mental health folks and things like that too. So just so you know that we can do that type of thing. And we can make accommodations for things. Sometimes, like, maybe a bicycle seat, the way that they normally are sold, isn't going to work for her anymore, but maybe there's some other kind of accommodation we can use. That's just kind of my 2 cents there. But yeah, we don't talk enough about how sometimes you can't use a tampon anymore until you figure out what the issue is. Sometimes people experience incontinence. They're having bowel or bladder issues, things like that. And talking about them just helps make them less taboo, helps us share our experiences and get the support that we need. How was your physical and or mental recovery in postpartum? Allison said, I had pelvic floor issues. I was referred to pelvic floor therapy after both births. The therapist helped me to understand what was going on in my body. They were able to break down the very painful scar tissue. There's all kinds of techniques we can use for that. Although I was not able to regain much strength in my pelvic floor, I was able to learn to manage my new situation. So I think that's a balancing act too. Like, a lot of times, if it's not going to return to how it was exactly before the birth, there are a lot of times that we can find, ways to manage things and still make your life be quality and comfortable and accessible to you. So just throwing that out there. In your motherhood journey, what has felt supportive, helpful, or good? And she said, having friends who I can be vulnerable and truthful with. Yes. Being vulnerable, I think, especially as moms, is so, so, so important. What has not felt supportive, helpful, or good? And then she said, being minimized or not listened to. Just shaking my head along. Yes. Like, I think if I'm on no other mission in this whole experience, it's to help people not feel minimized or not listened to. Like, that just drives me bonkers. What have you learned about yourself throughout your motherhood journey? She said, I am a strong, faithful, loving woman. I think it's really cool to learn just more about yourself. This is a major life transition and you learn so much. How did your motherhood experience change you as a person? And she said, having a child is the most vulnerable experience in my life. I can never not be vulnerable now that I have children. I want to just make a point there. I love that she said that, because that's not necessarily a negative thing. Of course, I'm not talking to her right now to ask her how she feels about that. That could be a neutral thing. That could be a positive thing or a negative thing or a combination of all of that. So I think just remembering that, like, having increased vulnerability in your life, or just whatever you're experiencing, not just that, but anything that you're experiencing in motherhood, it can be different without being bad. It can be good and bad. It can be a whole mixture of things. We're more complicated than this like dichotomy that I think our society like puts us in a lot of the time. So just tossing that thought out, food for thought. And then tell your pregnancy, birth, or postpartum story in your own words. And then she said, I can do this at a later time. It's a lot to type. So we might hear more from Allison in the future, but even if we don't, I think that was so amazing of her to share all of that. Such important points were brought up, and throughout this whole series, I just want the moms sharing all of their, their stories, and myself, I want you to feel heard and validated, and that you're not alone, and that it's not too weird or gross or taboo to reach out and ask for support. We're here for you. There's people out there for you that can help and support you along this journey. Even if you feel like, well, moms have done it for years, or moms figure it out, or whatever. I think it goes back to that whole thing that's out there now, where like people post their highlight reel, or you don't know what people are really experiencing kind of behind closed doors. So try to remind yourself that even the people that look like they're doing, perfectly and everything is happy and joyful, it doesn't mean that they always are. And that's not to say like they shouldn't be, but just to remind you that a lot more is going on in their journey and in everyone's journey than a lot of people let on. And so it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be vulnerable, and ask questions when you're not sure. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy, and we'll talk soon.